Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. This week we will be continuing our review of the Kingdom Keepers Return series with Kingdom Keepers The Return Book 1 Disneylands. If you guys missed my review for Syndrome, which was my last video, I will leave a link to it up in the cards so you guys can go and rewatch that. I will also link to the Kingdom Keepers playlist where you can watch all of the Kingdom Keepers related videos so you guys can get caught up before Kingdom Keepers Inheritance drops. As always, format for the book review, summary of the story, pros, cons, and then my final thought and rating of the book. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started. The Return series, and particularly this book, take place several weeks after the defeat of the Overtakers. Everything's more or less settled down for the Keepers. Everyone's starting to move on with their lives and starting to move past the Kingdom Keepers, aside from Finn. Finn is really trying to keep the Keepers together because A, it's the best part of his life, as he keeps saying, but B, he's convinced that Wayne still has one more mission for them and the Kingdom Keepers can officially disband. The other Keepers have started to move on with their lives and don't necessarily believe Finn, so it's up to Finn to prove that Wayne really did leave them a message for one last mission they need to undertake. So after some time, Finn is able to finally convince the others that he is not going crazy and that Wayne actually did leave them a message for one last mission they needed to complete. During Finn's search for the truth, he ends up revealing that Wayne was looking into the origins of the Overtakers and using DHI technology to figure out how to time travel, and he was successfully able to do that. So this final mission entails all of the Kingdom Keepers going back to the early days of Disney and trying to stop the Overtakers from forming in the first place. While that is going on, Jess and Amanda have slowly started to grow apart as secrets start to tear the two of them apart as friends. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about for the prose section of the book is Finn. So Finn is the emotional heart of this book in particular, because a lot of this book is sort of a combination of Finn trying to convince everyone that he isn't going insane or just really suffering from grief, and him trying to convince the others of what he's saying is true. And a lot of this book is just Finn feeling ostracized from his friends because, like I said in the story section, they're sort of moving on with their lives, but Finn is pretty convinced that he needs to do one last thing for Wayne and he needs his friends to help. So I really do understand where Finn's coming from. I think we've all had those points in our lives where something like really special is ending and we just want it to stay and we do whatever we can to make it stay. I really like Finn's story in this because it's a lot of him sort of internalizing his grief and trying to figure out what happens next, and him trying to convince his friends that he isn't going insane. So Finn, again, is the emotional heart of this book. He really brings all the other Keepers together before they drift apart so much that it would be almost impossible for them to come back together for this one last mission. And again, Pearson does a really good job at writing Finn's grief at Wayne's passing, because it really hasn't been that long since Wayne died in Insider. It's been maybe a couple of months. It hasn't been that long. So Finn's grief is just really palpable in this book. Pearson does a great job at showing it, at writing it, but also Finn's ostracization from the others, because again, the others are starting to move on, but Finn feels like he can't, because he honestly does believe that Wayne has one last mission for them, and he just happens to be right. I really do empathize for Finn in this book, and I think he was the great emotional core of this book in particular. Alright, so second thing we are going to be talking about is the plot balance Pearson was able to maintain within this book between the Keepers and the Fairleys. So this is another book where we follow both the Kingdom Keepers and the Fairleys through their two major plots. Again, Pearson was able to get a really good balance between the two, because we spend like around half the book following the Kingdom Keepers and the other half more or less following the Fairleys. And I really do like the balance that Pearson was able to get, because again, when you're following multiple characters like these books are, it's kind of easy to get overwhelmed or have one overshadow the other. But Pearson again was able to really really find a very good balance between both of the plot points. And I really do like that because he's able to strike the balance between following the original keepers and the Fairleys without having the keepers overtake the Fairleys and their importance. Both of the plot points are equally as important to the book overall, and one of them doesn't really overshadow the other. Okay, so third thing we are going to be talking about for the prose section is the conflict between Jess and Amanda. Like I said in my story segment, Jess and Amanda, for their parts of the book, are in a conflict between each other because they have to ride a very, very fine line between helping the keepers and their mission and trying not to get caught and being able to stay at DSI. So that conflict between the two is really good because for the most part, the two of them have always been connected. There hasn't been a whole lot of major fighting and conflict between the two, but this book really changes that for the better because now the central conflict between the two of them is they can't truly communicate with one another because there are things that Jess can't say, and Amanda is like really trying to pry that information from Jess, but Jess can't openly say it without getting in some serious trouble. So that conflict really, I think, is a lot of fun in the book because again, the two of them have largely been together and always been connected because they've basically grown up as sisters. They haven't had any sort of major conflicts, but this book again changes that, and I think it's for the better because I kind of enjoy this conflict between the two of them because it gives a lot of tension between the two without getting like crazy dramatic, like save the world type dramatic, but it is very dramatic between the two of them because we are so used to the two of them communicating really well and being there for each other. But this book again changes that, and I think it makes the book better in the long run for adding this. So one thing I did want to touch on very quickly in this book is how Pearson handles time travel. So the way Pearson describes time travel and how it works in this book is that the DHIs are the only way to successfully perform time travel and not have any long-term effects that make the keepers go insane. The DHIs are the only ways to do that, and I think that's actually a brilliant idea because scientifically it even makes sense because the DHIs are just projected light, and the idea is if you could go fast enough you could theoretically go back in time, and it makes sense that as the DHIs are projected light that they would be able to time travel. So I really did enjoy Pearson's take on time travel because we've had so many various takes on time travel, but I think this is a really unique take because it requires whoever's time traveling to be able to cross over as a DHI, and I really like that concept, and I think it was a really cool addition to the book, and it just makes the story really cool, and it opens up so many possibilities, obviously, as we're seeing in this entire series. Alright, so starting off with the con section, the one thing I want to talk about is the book not having a Greg Lewowski connection. Now, I probably should have made this clear beforehand, but this book takes place technically before Syndrome, because what happens at the very end of this book basically leads into the beginning of Syndrome. And Syndrome is basically just what's happening with Jess and Amanda during the first book. So I probably should have really ended up releasing this first, but you know, whatever. But this only comes up because I think there should have been one section at the end of it. It could have even been the epilogue that showed Greg Lewowski, because then at least it makes it clear that when the first book ends, Syndrome starts, and we can see how Greg Lewowski got his orders from Maleficent and all that. I think there was a slight missed opportunity. It's not a big thing. It's not anything that I'm going to hold against the book. But I think it would have been cool to see Greg Lewowski get his orders initially, and then the end of this first book flows into Syndrome, and we actually see Greg Lewowski's plan get thrown into action. I just think there could have been a cool moment of connection between the two books, but it is what it is if the book didn't do that, and it's whatever. I don't really hold it against the book or anything. Alright, so final thoughts on the book here. Overall, I really do enjoy this as the proper kickoff to the Return series. Again, that was kind of my fault that I released the Syndrome video before this, but overall it doesn't matter which one you read first. So as the proper kickoff to the Return series, I really think Pearson did a great job with that. Finn was the emotional core of the book as always. He was very good, very well written. The Jess and Amanda conflict kept things interesting and was very much needed because it really put the two of them at odds against each other, which we haven't seen before that. So I really did enjoy that part of the conflict, and the book overall is really good and a really good start off to a series and a really wild ride for the Kingdom Keepers. So I'm going to be giving Disneyland's an 8 out of 10. Okay guys, so in the comments, if you guys want to discuss the Kingdom Keepers series in general, feel more than free to talk about it down in the comments. Just please try and keep it spoiler free for anyone who hasn't read the books and might want to in the future. Also, down in the comments, if you guys have books you want me to do reviews on in the future, please leave your recommendations down in the comments. So, if you guys want to connect with me on social media, my Instagram is Riley Murray Book Reviews, my Facebook is also Riley Murray Book Reviews, and my Twitter is Riley T. Murray. I will leave links to everything down in the description. If you guys want to connect with me on Discord, my Discord is Riley Murray Book Reviews. I will also put a link to that down in the comments. Alright everyone, that is going to be it for the video this week. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and don't forget, keep on reading.